Starting off today, we are heading over to Bumblebee, Arizona. Bumblebee is officially one of the cutest sounding towns with one of the most disturbing stories. This story is one of love that ends in the most horrifying way. In late October 2003, the mysterious and chilling killing of Brandon Roomba and his girlfriend Lisa Gieri shook the quiet backdrop of Arizona's vast desert. The young couple had set out for a romantic camping trip armed with a new camera to capture the essence of their adventure under the starlit sky. Their destination was a secluded spot near Bumblebee Road, just north of Phoenix, where they planned to spend the weekend away from the bustling city life to celebrate their first anniversary. But what was meant to be a peaceful getaway turned sinister when they never returned. Days later, both Brandon and Lisa were found with their lives taken, still in their sleeping bags. Despite a flurry of investigative efforts, including a very mysterious photograph retrieved from their camera depicting what looked like an eerie nighttime scene, the case remains cold. The chilling question of who could have done this and why still haunts detectives to this day. Next on our list, we are heading over to Pinetop Lakeside. Pinetop Lakeside is a lovely little mountain town that hides an absolutely gruesome story from 2008. Chad Coker, a man with a very turbulent past marred by DV and substance abuse, committed a horrific crime that shattered the peace of this seemingly ordinary evening. It all began when William Edward Westover, freshly acquainted with Coker's ex-wife, ventured out on a first date that would tragically be his last. As the night progressed, Coker, fueled by jealousy and rage and probably some of those substances, tracked down the couple after they had cautiously avoided him earlier at a local spot. The nightmare escalated when Coker forcefully barged into his ex-wife's apartment late at night. With a cold determination, he attacked Westover with a ferocity that ended in a horrifying number of wounds. Amid the chaos, Coker's ex-wife, while desperately fighting for her own life and that of Westover, managed to call 911, a decision that likely spared her from a similar fate. Police arrived swiftly, only to find a scene straight out of a horror film. Coker was apprehended while clutching a weapon moments after committing the very dreadful act. Next, we're heading over to Vulture City. Vulture City is the kind of place where you start to wonder what those old buildings could say if they could talk, and some people swear they hear whispers anyway. Nestled in the rugged landscapes of Arizona, Vulture City whispers tales of its ruckus past, drawing the curious and the brave to its deserted streets. Founded during the feverish rush of the 1800s gold boom, this now abandoned town once thrummed with the dreams and greed of fortune seekers. At its peak, Vulture City buzzed with miners, but it wasn't just the glitter of gold that marked its history. It was also scarred by a dark underbelly of violence and lawlessness. Stories of killing and betrayal were as common as the dust on its streets. At the heart of the town stands a grim sentinel, the huge ironwood tree. Local legend claims that this tree served a chilling purpose as the town's hanging tree, where numerous outlaws allegedly swung from its gnarled branches, their lives cut short by frontier justice. Today, some say that the spirits of those ill-fated souls linger, manifesting as shadowy figures that roam near the tree at night. Next up today, we are talking about the Superstition Mountains and the lost Dutchman's gold mine. Imagine a legendary gold mine that people have risked their lives in pursuit of, and that is the lost Dutchman's gold mine. This place is nestled within the rugged expanse of the Superstition Mountains in Arizona, of course, which if you've been a viewer of this channel for a while, you will know all about. The Superstition Mountains are said to be one of the most cursed and strange locations in all of the United States. According to legend, this elusive mine was discovered by Jacob Waltz, a German immigrant in the 19th century who took the secret of its location to his grave. Known colloquially as the Dutchman, a nod to the American mispronunciation of Deutsch meaning German, Waltz's hidden treasure has sparked the imaginations of many. Over the years, the story of this fabled mine has been told and retold, outstripping even the famous tales of Captain Kidd's treasure and California California's Lost Peg Leg Mine in popularity. Every year, approximately 9,000 people are lured by the promise of gold, venturing into the wilderness to uncover its secrets. Tragically, this quest has not been without cost. In one of the more recent and somber chapters of this saga, Jesse Capon from Denver, obsessed with finding the mine, vanished in 2009 while searching in the Tonto National Forest. His remains were tragically recovered 3 years later in a remote crevice. The story of the lost Dutchman's mine, wrapped in danger and allure, continues to be a poignant reminder of the powerful draw of the unknown. Moving on, today we are heading over to Florence, Arizona. Florence looks like a lovely little town with some of the richest history in the entire county, but it holds the tale of a chilling crime with a horrifying backstory. Let's take it back to January 1984, when Robert Mormon was serving a 9-year to life sentence in Florence for kidnapping when an eerie twist of events unfolded during a 3-day furlough. His adoptive mother, Roberta, visited him staying at the quaint Blue Mist Motel. On Friday the 13th, a date synonymous with bad luck, Mormon purchased knives and food, setting a very sinister scene. His mother, supposedly ill, became the subject of whispered concerns among locals as Mormon weaved a web of deceit, claiming she had left the motel while her belongings suggested otherwise. As the day progressed, Mormon's desperate attempts to dispose of suspiciously described garbage bags raised alarms. The local pizza parlor owner, sensing something amiss, tipped off the police. Under the guise of concern, Mormon misled the authorities about his mother's whereabouts. Meanwhile, he sought help from a prison lieutenant to dispose of what he called dog bones, which alarmingly turned out to be human remains. The truth unraveled very quickly, leading to Mormon's arrest and a trial that peeled back the layers of a disturbed mind and a gruesome crime. Despite claims of a possible motive that drove him to violence, the jury found him guilty, unswayed by his insanity defense. On February 29, 2012, justice echoed through the halls of the prison as Mormon faced execution, closing a very dark chapter rooted in betrayal and a mother's tragic visit to a sleepy motel in Florence. Next up, we are talking about Phoenix, Arizona, more specifically Baseline Road. Okay, before you come at me, I know that Phoenix is not a small town, and I am not trying to pretend that it is, but when I heard about these horrifying crimes of this man known as the Baseline Killer, I truly had no choice but to tell you all about it. Mark Goudeau, known as the Baseline Killer, is a figure straight out of a grim crime thriller. Between August 2005 and June 2006, Phoenix was his chilling playground where he committed a horrifying series of crimes that included taking the lives of 9 people, as well as numerous other disgusting and disturbing crimes that I will spare you the details of. This period in Phoenix was marked by a cloud of fear and mystery as Goudeau operated under the radar, choosing his victims at random, which only added to the city's panic. His moniker came from the Baseline Road in Phoenix, where many of his early attacks occurred. What makes his spree particularly disturbing is the brazenness and brutality of his crimes, coupled with his ability to evade capture for almost a year. His arrest didn't just bring relief, it ended a very dark chapter in Phoenix's history, turning him from a mysterious figure into a notorious convict. Next on our list, we are heading over to Tombstone, Arizona. Tombstone just already sounds like a creepy place, and this place isn't just any old Wild West town, it's the poster child for cowboy showdowns and spooky tales. Established in 1879, this town quickly earned a reputation as the real deal frontier town, complete with saloon brawls, notorious outlaws, and the infamous gunfight at the OK Corral. But it's not just the bullets and bravado that keep people talking. Tombstone's also known for its very eerie encounters. Places like the Birdcage Theater, once a rollicking entertainment hub, now host a different kind of crowd. Ghostly figures of cowboys and saloon girls that some say never left. Mysterious voices, sudden chills, and phantom figures peering from old windows make it easy to believe that in Tombstone, some residents might have just stuck around forever. This blend of gritty history and unresolved mystery makes makes Tombstone a town too tough to die and possibly too spirited to ever be forgotten. Next up, we are heading over to Bisbee. They say that beneath Bisbee's streets, old mining tunnels twist and turn, and some believe that they lead not just to forgotten gold, but to something far darker and stranger. Like, say, the underworld. Back in its heyday, Bisbee was a bustling mining town, vibrant with the clang of picks and the hustle of miners digging deep into the earth. Today, it stands as a relic of the past, but beneath its charming streets lies a sprawling labyrinth of old mine tunnels, a veritable underground city left over from its mining boom. The real intrigue, however, starts with the local legends that have seeped into the town's identity as much as the mines themselves. There are whispers among the locals about mysterious portals hidden within these tunnels, gateways that lead to another dimension, or even more thrillingly, to the underworld itself. Tales of strange disappearances and eerie, unexplained encounters beneath the surface lend an air of mystery that makes Bisbee a place where history feels alive, and the borders between the unknown and the known blur intriguingly. Next on our list, we are heading over to Goldfield Ghost Town. In Goldfield, it's not just the creaky old buildings and the dusty streets that give you chills. Whispers say the ghosts of gold-hungry miners still linger, their restless spirits echoing through the abandoned town. Taking it back in time, Goldfield was the epitome of a boom town, thriving with miners and merchants drawn by the lure of gold. However, like many such towns, its fortunes dwindled when the gold veins ran dry, leaving behind empty buildings and silent streets. But Goldfield did not stay silent for long. Reimagined as a tourist attraction, it offers a peek into a past filled with both prosperity and hardship. Wander through its recreated streets and you might feel the echoes of the past underfoot. Visitors report sightings and sensations that suggest the old residents, particularly a miner known as George, might still be hanging around, perhaps not ready to leave the excitement of the gold rush behind. Truly taking the meaning of ghost town to a whole new level with that one, George. Thanks so much. And finally on our list today, we are heading over to Jerome. Jerome, Arizona isn't just your run-of-the-mill ghost town. It's a place brimming with historical charm and eerie tales that attract the curious from far and wide. Back in its heyday, Jerome was a bustling hub for copper mining, thriving with energy and ambition. However, as the mines closed in the 1950s, the town's vibrant pulse slowed dramatically, leaving it teetering on the edge of becoming another forgotten relic of the American West. But Jerome refused to fade into oblivion. Instead, it reinvented itself, capitalizing on its spooky reputation to draw in tourists. The centerpiece of Jerome's ghostly allure is the Jerome Grand Hotel, once a hospital where thousands of miners were treated. It's crazy to turn an old hospital into a hotel, like you're just asking for ghosts. Today, it's reputed to be one of the most haunted buildings in the entire state, with guests reporting sightings of spectral patients roaming its halls, ghostly children playing tricks, and eerie, unexplained noises echoing through the night. The entire town, it seems, is a stage for the supernatural, with many of its buildings and businesses boasting their own chilling stories of the paranormal. This rich blend of history and mysterious occurrences make Jerome a uniquely captivating destination for those fascinated by the past and also the paranormal. Starting off, we are heading over to Canyon Lake. Canyon Lake was just a tranquil, gated community in California until it became the very dark backdrop for the heinous crimes of Dana Sue Gray. In a horrifying spree, Gray brutally attacked and took the lives of elderly women using their credit cards to fund lavish shopping trips. Her brutal acts, fueled by material greed, culminated in her arrest following a detailed description from a surviving victim. Gray's chilling case underscores a disturbing reality. Even the most serene towns can harbor sinister secrets, reminding us that evil knows no geographical bounds. Next up, we are heading over to Yuba City. On the surface, Juan Corona seemed like a regular man who was hired as a labor contractor at some fruit orchards in Yuba City, California. But what the residents didn't know is that things would very quickly take a dark turn. By establishing his own business, he became a crucial link between local farmers and seasonal laborers. But the tranquility of Yuba City was shattered in 1971 when farmer Goro Keiichiro discovered a suspicious, man-sized hole in his orchard, leading to a very grim discovery: multiple bodies buried in shallow graves bearing brutal marks of violence. Corona, previously linked to a violent crime and known for his troubled history, emerged as the prime suspect. His connection to the victims, evidenced by receipts and chilling ledgers, alongside potential tools found in his home, formed the backbone of the prosecution's case. Despite an initial conviction being overturned, Corona was eventually sentenced to 25 life terms, marking him as one of America's most notorious serial killers at the time. His repeated parole requests have been uniformly denied, which I'm sure we can all breathe a sigh of relief for. Next up, we are heading over to Visalia. In the small town of Visalia, California, a series of burglaries, horrifying crimes, and even a killing known as the Visalia Ransacker incidents took place in the mid-1970s. But what if I told you that these crimes were solved decades later in a shocking twist? The perpetrator broke into homes, committed petty thefts, and escalated to violence, culminating in taking the life of Claude Snelling, a college professor trying to protect his daughter. These crimes terrorized the community and remained unsolved for decades until advancements in DNA technology linked them to a man, revealing the disturbing depth of his crimes across California. Many of you likely know the man who is most often referred to as the Golden State Killer. It is believed that these series of crimes in Visalia acted as a sort of training ground for the GSK before his later crime sprees that we are more familiar with. Next on our list today, we are heading over to Keddie, which is in Northern California. In the spring of 1979, Glenna Susan or Sue Sharp, seeking a fresh start after separating from her husband, moved with family to Northern California near to her brother. Initially residing in a trailer, the Sharp family later relocated to a more spacious home in Keddie, a quiet Sierra Nevada community. This tranquility was shattered on a grim morning in April 1981 when a horrifying scene was discovered in their home, plunging the town into a chilling mystery. Sue and 3 others were found deceased under brutal circumstances, prompting a very complex investigation involving local law enforcement and even the FBI. Amidst swirling rumors and a few solid leads, the case unfortunately grew cold, haunted by unanswered questions and the specter of injustice. The community of Keddie, enveloped in the shadow, would absolutely never be the same, and the Sharp family tragedy unfortunately remains unsolved. Next up on our list, we are moving over to Eureka. Eureka is usually like, wow, that's amazing. It's not right now, unfortunately. Eureka is a town in California, of course, and it is located on the shores of Humboldt Bay, but this beautiful coastal city was met with a very dark cloud back in 2014 when a local crime involving a priest rocked the town. The priest was sadly found in the rectory of his church, and authorities quickly knew that foul play was to be suspected. The feeling of the city changed after this crime as people were unsure of how to respond or who could possibly be responsible for such a horrific crime. This was all fueled by the fact of where this crime had taken place, in a place of worship where members of the community went to feel safe or feel taken care of, and it was now a place of unspeakable evil. After thorough investigations by local law enforcement, a suspect came to light, a man named Gary Lee Bullock, who had recently been released from jail just days before this crime took place. In the end, Gary was put on trial and found guilty for his crimes. While he had tried to plead an insanity case, the evidence proving that after the crimes he attempted to destroy the evidence proved that he knew what he had done was wrong, and he was sentenced to 2 life sentences. Next up on our list, we have Placerville. Nestled in the heart of California's Gold Rush region, Placerville, once ominously dubbed Hangtown, holds a treasure trove of history mingled with spectral whispers from its boisterous past. This town, a pivotal site during a frenzied epoch of American history, proudly retains its architectural lineage, offering a tangible connection to the days when justice was often swift and harsh. As you stroll down its main thoroughfare, enveloped by the echoes of yesteryears, you can't help but feel the palpable presence of the Old West. Places like the Hangman's Tree Saloon and the historic Carey House Hotel are not just remnants of history, they are places where some say the spirits of those who once tread these grounds linger, unwilling or unable to move on. Next on our list, we are heading over to Felton. Picture this, a tranquil California town in the 70s. An era of peace and love suddenly becomes the place of a shocking event that shook the very foundation of the community. Enter John Linley Frazier, a man whose journey from a troubled youth to a convicted individual is as bewildering as it is tragic. Once a high school dropout from Santa Cruz County, Frazier spiraled into a deep obsession with apocalyptic prophecies and environmental zealotry, convincing himself that he was a chosen savior tasked with a very grim mission. On an unassuming day in October 1970, the serene mansion of Victor Ota, a well-respected ophthalmologist, became the scene of a very chilling act. Frazier, armed and determined, targeted Ota's family and their secretary, leaving a trail of sorrow in what was once a home filled with laughter and love. The perpetrator's manifesto, a very bizarre note left in an expensive car, hinted at a warped crusade against materialism, a tragic commentary on distorted ideals. While the case eventually saw justice, with Frazier sentenced and later found lifeless in his cell years later, the incident remains a very dark stain on the narrative of a town caught between its idyllic past and the harsh realities of a changing world. Next on our list today, we have Covina, California. On a seemingly festive Christmas Eve in 2008, Covina, a town of course in California, became the home for a shocking and very tragic event. The Ortega family, known for their love of the holiday season, had gathered to celebrate, embracing the joy and togetherness that Christmas is known for. However, the night took an unimaginable turn when an individual dressed as Santa Claus arrived at their door. This was no ordinary holiday visitor. It was Bruce Jeffrey Pardo, who unleashed a horrifying sequence of violence, leading to the loss of 9 lives at the Ortega family gathering. He didn't just use firearms, he also employed a makeshift flamethrower, turning a scene of celebration into one of absolute devastation. Pardo's actions were not just a spree of violence, but a meticulously planned event rooted in a personal vendetta stemming from a recent divorce. Despite the meticulous planning, the night ended in Pardo's self-inflicted demise, adding a very grim conclusion to an already dark chapter. The incident left an indelible mark on the town of Covina, transforming a date meant for joy into a memory of loss and sorrow. Next up, in a much lighter turn of events, we are heading over to Idlewild, California. Nestled amidst the towering pines and rustic cabins, Idlewild serves up its own unique cocktail of natural beauty mingled with the mystique of the unknown. It's not just a haven for artists and hikers, but also a hotspot for those intrigued by the paranormal and the arcane. Imagine sitting by a crackling campfire, the air crisp with mountain chill, when suddenly the night is pierced by inexplicable lights dancing in the sky. Are they wayward campers, a trick of the light, or something more mysterious? Whispers of occult rituals in the surrounding woods only adds an extra layer of intrigue, painting Idlewild not just as a picturesque retreat, but as a place where the veil between the ordinary and the extraordinary seems very thin. And finally, we are ending off our list today in Julian, California. In the serene town of Julian, known for its golden apples and rustic charm, there is a slice of mystery that rivals even its famed pies. As night falls over this quaint mountain retreat, some residents and visitors report witnessing mysterious lights weaving through the woods, an otherworldly spectacle that stirs curiosity and whispers of the unknown. Not only this, but a very peculiar phenomenon has been observed. Episodes of unexplained sleepwalking, where individuals are drawn towards the forest under a moonlit trance. These incidents, free from sinister undertones, paint Julian not just as a haven for pie enthusiasts and nature lovers, but also as a hotspot for those intrigued by the unexplained. It's a place where the ordinary meets the mysterious, adding an intriguing layer to this otherwise idyllic setting. Starting off today, we are heading over to Malahide in County Dublin. Malahide is a picturesque town just outside of Dublin, Ireland, and it is steeped in charm and chilling tales, particularly around the historic Malahide Castle. One thing I learned on this list is there are a lot of castles in Ireland. This castle isn't just another beautiful Irish landmark, it's practically a convention center for ghosts. With over 800 years under its belt, the castle's walls are thick with history and apparently spectral natural residents. One of the most talked about ghosts is Puck, the castle jester who tragically fell in love with a noblewoman. Legend has it his unrequited love led to his demise on the castle grounds, and he's been hanging around ever since, possibly hoping for a second chance at romance. Then there's Sir Walter Hussey, another one of the castle's more permanent tenants. He was killed in battle on what was supposed to be his wedding day, and now his spirit is said to roam the castle halls, maybe mourning his lost love or just scaring the daylights out of tourists. So if you're ever in Malahide, take a stroll through the castle and see if you bump into Puck or Sir Walter. Just a normal day in this quaint town. Local beauty, historical intrigue, and a couple of heartbroken ghosts. Next we are heading over to Ballygally. If you're up for a spooky stay, Ballygally Castle in County Antrim in Northern Ireland should be right up your alley. This castle turned hotel isn't just known for its stunning views and historical architecture, it has a ghostly reputation that tends to keep guests on their toes. Legend has it that the castle is haunted by Lady Isabel Shaw, who tragically fell to her death from one of its high windows. The story goes that her husband locked her in her room, leading to her fateful attempt to escape. Today, she's said to roam the castle halls, perhaps seeking justice or just startling guests. Reports of eerie knocks on doors during the night and sightings of Lady Isabel's apparition gives this place a chilling vibe. Whether it's the wind or something more spectral, Ballygally Castle embraces its spooky lore, making it a perfect spot for those who love a little history mixed in with their haunts. So, if you hear a knock in the middle of the night, it might not just be housekeeping. Just saying. Next we're heading over to Rosslare, which is located in County Wexford. If you're up for a spooky adventure, head to Ladies Island near Rosslare in the county of Wexford. This place isn't just a scenic spot by the sea, it's got a reputation that could give even the bravest a little bit of a shiver. Back in the day, Ladies Island was a bustling pilgrimage destination, drawing folks from all over with its sacred energy. But now, some say those ancient pilgrims haven't quite left. Visitors often whisper about really eerie encounters and sightings of spectral figures that just linger in the mist. Whether it's the rustle of the wind that sounds like whispered prayers or a sudden chill that seems to follow you, the island holds on to its mysterious past tightly. Each creak and echo is a reminder of its deep, haunting history, making Ladies Island a magnet for ghost hunters. So if you're ever in Rosslare, why not take a detour to this ghostly retreat? Just remember, it might be more than the sea air that sends a chill down your spine. Next we are heading to Clononey. Tucked away in the heart of Ireland in County Offaly, Clononey Castle stands as a haunting reminder of its very grim past. This towering structure isn't just another picturesque ruin, it's a place where history and horror intertwine. The castle is notorious for being the final home of two cousins of Anne Boleyn, the ill-fated Queen of England, who were said to have been imprisoned and met their untimely deaths within these stone walls. Today, it's said their spirits roam the castle grounds, perhaps unable to leave the scene of their sorrow. The castle's remote location only adds to the spooky energy, with its thick stone walls and dark, narrow passages creating the perfect setting for ghost stories. Whether you're a history buff or just a seeker of the supernatural, Clononey Castle offers a chilling glimpse into a past filled with intrigue and tragedy, making it a must-visit for anyone touring the Emerald Isle's spookier sites. Next we are heading over to Portumna. Located in County Galway, Portumna might seem like just another charming Irish town at first glance, but dig a little deeper or just wait until the sun sets and you'll discover its spine-chilling side. The town is famed for the eerie ruins of the Dominican Priory and the formidable Portumna Castle. Wander through these historic sites and you might just experience more than just a lesson in architecture. Visitors often talk about sudden, inexplicable drops in temperature, like walking into a natural refrigerator. Then there are also the ghostly figures and whispers that hang in the air, almost as tangible as the damp Irish mist. Some say these are the restless spirits of clan leaders, once powerful figures who now make their presence known in more ghostly forms. Whether it's the sound of footsteps echoing strolling down an empty hall, or the fleeting glimpse of a shadowy figure through the corner of your eye, Portumna offers a hauntingly good time for anyone brave enough to explore its past. Around our halfway mark today, we are heading over to Kilkay. Tucked away in County Kildare, Kilkay Castle isn't just another Irish castle. It is steeped in stories that walk a fine line between the eerie and the enchanting. Dating back over 8 centuries, it's one of the oldest inhabited castles in Ireland, but what really sets Kilkay apart is its unique ghost story. According to local legend, every 7 years the castle's founder, Sir Walter de Riddlesford, is said to ride around the castle grounds on a horse with silver shoes. Unlike most ghost tales that might send a shiver down your spine, Sir Walter's spectral visits are actually considered a good omen, bringing luck to those who witness his apparition. It's kind of a nice, charming twist to the usual haunted house stories, blending the mystical with the historical in a setting that's as beautiful as it is mysterious. Whether you're a history buff or a ghost story enthusiast, or you're just in it for the scenic views, Kilkay Castle offers a slice of the past with a ghostly good luck charm thrown in just for a little good measure. Next, we are heading over to Ardgillan. Found in County Dublin, Ardgillan Castle has sprawling gardens and historical architecture, and it's also got a creepy story that makes it a hotspot for ghost hunters and lovers of the paranormal. The castle is said to be haunted by the Lady of the Stairs, the sorrowful spirit of the original owner's wife. Legend has it that she met a tragic end right at the castle, overwhelmed by grief upon hearing that her husband had perished at sea. She supposedly threw herself from the castle's bridge. Since then, her ghost is rumored to haunt the area, particularly the bridge, where she is occasionally seen by visitors, forever stuck in her moment of despair. This eerie tale adds a layer of spectral intrigue to the castle, making Ardgillan not just a beautiful place to visit for its grounds and history, but also a thrilling adventure for anyone fascinated by the tales of the supernatural that seem to permeate the very stones of this ancient structure. So if you're ever wandering around Ardgillan Castle, keep an eye out for the Lady of the Stairs. You might just catch a glimpse into this tragic figure from the past. Next, we are heading over to Enniscorthy, nestled in the heart of County Wexford. Enniscorthy is a town with a past as rich as it is eerie. At the center of its many ghostly tales is Enniscorthy Castle, a fortress that has stood the test of time, bearing witness to numerous battles and sieges throughout the centuries. The castle's storied walls are said to echo with more than just the sounds of tourists and historians. They're rumored to be haunted by the spirits of former prisoners who once languished in its dark, dank dungeons. Locals and visitors whisper about chilling encounters and mysterious sounds, footsteps echoing through empty halls, faint whispers in the night air, and the clinking of ancient chains. These spectral sightings make Enniscorthy a magnet for ghost hunters and those fascinated by the paranormal, adding a very spooky layer to this otherwise very charming Irish town. Next, we are heading over to Leap. Of course, no list on creepy places in Ireland is truly complete without Leap, more specifically Leap Castle in County Cork. It isn't just any old castle, it's reputed to be the most haunted castle in Ireland, and for good reason. This place isn't just about drafty halls and eerie echoes. Thanks to its seriously spooky residents and a history that reads like a horror novel, it is truly the stuff of legends. One of the most infamous spirits lurking here is the Elemental, a creepy entity that's about as friendly as a bear with a headache. This spirit isn't just your standard ghost, it's said to be a very powerful presence, leaving a chilling air of menace throughout the castle. The castle's past is just as unsettling, with a legacy of brutal clan battles, think medieval warfare, right in the corridors. And if that's not enough to make you shiver, hidden dungeons were once stumbled upon, revealing human remains that tell tales of gruesome ends. Leap Castle's layers of history and hauntings make it a prime spot for those who love a good ghost story wrapped in the mystique of old Ireland. So if you're ever in Leap and fancy a dose of the supernatural, you know where to go. Just Don't say I didn't warn you. And finally, rounding out our list today, we have Loftus Hall in County Wexford. This isn't just your regular old spooky mansion, it's the heavyweight champion of haunted houses in Ireland. So picture this, an imposing, eerie estate with a history that gives even the bravest ghost hunters the chills. The most chilling tale from Loftus Hall is that of a mysterious stranger who arrived one stormy night joining a family card game. Legend has it that during the game, a woman dropped a card and bent under the table only to discover the stranger had cloven hooves instead of feet. Realizing that they were in the presence of the devil himself, the family watched in horror as he transformed into a fiery ball and shot through the roof, leaving behind a dark supernatural presence that lingers to this day. Over the years, visitors have reported all sorts of paranormal activity, from ghostly whispers to eerie cold spots, and even sightings of a distressed woman wandering through the halls. Loftus Hall's blend of historical drama and bone-chilling ghost stories make it a must-visit for anyone who loves a good scare, drawing thrill seekers and paranormal experts from around the world eager to explore its haunted heritage.
We're gonna kick things off with Loveland. How on earth did I not put Loveland, Ohio in part 1? Loveland is home to one of the strangest creatures said to stalk the state, the Loveland frog. But it's also home to a supposedly haunted castle. Loveland Castle was constructed by Harry Andrews. A very interesting man this guy was. He had a lot of interest in knights and medieval lore. Andrews was born in 1890. He worked as a medic during World War I. He then contracted meningitis during the war and was believed to be dead. His body was actually moved to the morgue, like he was done. But when his body was taken back to the hospital to be dissected, the doctors were like, hey, you know what, why not? Let's just see if we can get his heart beating again with adrenaline. Miraculously, it worked. Andrews, who'd now spent a whole bunch of time in Europe and then almost died, was now even more into medieval history and returned home with this newfound determination to build his very own castle. Eventually, he constructed Loveland Castle along the banks of the Little Miami River. Andrews then moved into the castle, where he lived until he died in 1981. Today, the castle is the headquarters for the Knights of the Golden Trail, an organization Andrews started dedicated to upholding the principles of knighthood, but Harry Andrews' spirit is said to still roam the castle grounds. Objects will mysteriously disappear or move, and voices are heard echoing through the corridors. And as I said at the top, of course, Loveland's supernatural reputation doesn't end with this castle. One of the most famous legends is that of the Loveland frog, or frogs. There have been multiple large frog-like creatures spotted near the Little Miami River over the years. Next up, we have Ashtabula, which is said to be haunted by the spirits of a tragic train disaster. So on December 29, 1876, the Pacific Express No. 5 crossed the Ashtabula Bridge, but because of particularly cold weather and structural weaknesses, the bridge collapsed, sending the train plummeting into the icy river below, and in the end, 98 people died. The scene must have been absolutely horrific, with rail cars crashing into each other and igniting in flame, and firefighters were unable to put out the flames, so people just cried out in pain and horror as they were consumed by fire, trapped in the wreckage. It was one of the worst rail accidents in US history, and the screams of those victims still haunt the area to this day. Some say you can occasionally hear them above the rush of the river. The Chestnut Grove Cemetery holds the remains of 19 of these victims, but their spirits are said to be very much active. Visitors to the cemetery have reported seeing ghostly apparitions. But along with the victims of the tragedy, there's also said to be the ghost of Charles Collins, one of the developers of the bridge. Witnesses claim to have seen his guilty spirit weeping at the sight of the tragedy or crying over people's graves. Some claim to see tiny lights even hovering below the new bridge where the old one once stood. Rogues Hollow near Doylestown, Ohio has its fair share of spooky tales as well. It's said that a mill worker died in a pretty gruesome manner, getting crushed by the mill wheel, and now his spirit is said to guard the area, keeping outsiders at bay. Then there's the eerie tale of the headless horse and the ghost oak tree. So at one time there was a large oak tree near Route 65, and one of its branches hung so low that riders on horseback had to duck as they passed under it. Well, one story goes that the branch was weighed down extra low with ice, and a poor horse just ran into it at top speed, lobbing off its head. From that point on, riders passing the area late at night would occasionally come across a devilish figure riding a ghostly headless horse. Next up we have Oxford, Ohio, which has one of the coolest ghosts, a phantom motorcyclist. So the story goes that back in the 40s there was this farmer's daughter. She was head over heels for this guy who was a bit of a James Dean type, leather jacket, motorcycle, very rebellious. Also a lot like me, minus the motorcycle, the leather jacket, and the rebellious part. His name was James, that's the similarity. And her father was not too thrilled about their relationship. He thought the guy was trouble, and he probably wasn't wrong. He forbade his daughter from seeing him. So to avoid her father's disapproval, they met up in complete secret, usually late at night when the coast was clear. And when it was, the girlfriend would flash the porch light 3 times as a signal for him to come over. Well, one night, the boyfriend decided he wanted to take their relationship to the next level and propose. He saw the 3 flashes and revved up his motorcycle, racing towards her house to pop the question, but as soon as he sped down the road, he lost control of his bike, crashing into a barbed wire fence. And ever since, people claim they've seen this mysterious light flickering in the distance along the road where he crashed, said to be the spirit of the phantom motorcyclist, still trying to reach his girl's house to ask for her hand in marriage. Next on the list is Chillicothe, where there were a series of mysterious disappearances between 2014 and 2015. Now, it all began in the spring of 2014 when Charlotte Trago vanished without a trace. Trago, who had struggled with addiction, was a mother of 2, and she remains missing to this day. Shortly after Trago's disappearance, another woman, Tamika Lynch, who was a friend of Trago's, went missing as well. Her body was discovered 3 weeks later by kayakers. It's pretty obvious there was foul play, but the official cause of her death was deemed inconclusive. Then there was the disappearance of Wanda Lemons in November of 2014. She's also never been found. On Christmas Day 2014, Shasta Hemmelrich went missing. Her body was later recovered from the Scioto River. Authorities claim she took her own life, but her family, as well as many others, think someone took it from her. Then there was the disappearance and discovery of Tiffany Sayers' body in May 2015. Her remains were found in a creek, covered by a sheet. And the final victim, Timberly Claytora's body, was found near an abandoned building. She died at the hands of a firearm. And the case just would have been handled completely differently if these women hadn't been battling addiction. That was the one thing connecting all these. They were all involved in that world. And there's just this kind of lax attitude when it comes to situations like this, unfortunately, where authorities are like, well, you know, they're part of that world. This is just what happens. So it really hasn't got the attention that it deserves. Now we move on to the town of Lancaster. Here, there used to be a home with an incredibly dark past, the Mudhouse Mansion. So the mansion's origins go back to the mid-19th century, when it was built as a grand estate for a wealthy family. But as time went on, the home fell into disrepair, and eventually it was abandoned and left to decay. And over the years, all these urban legends started to form around it. One of the most infamous stories is that the family had actually died in the mansion. Some versions of the tale claim that they were killed by an unknown assailant. Others go that they'd been driven to madness by some sinister force lurking within the mansion's walls. The Mudhouse Mansion was even said to be the birthplace of Bloody Mary herself. The mansion was demolished in 2015, but some folks will still claim to see ghostly figures of the mansion's former residents wandering the grounds, forever trapped in a limbo between the worlds of the living and the dead. Alright, one of the strangest unsolved mysteries in Ohio has to be the Circleville letters case. Now I'm going to paraphrase here because there's a lot of detail. We could probably do an entire video about this case alone, but I'll go over it. It all started in 1976. Residents of Circleville started receiving these unsettling, threatening letters containing all these intimate details of their personal lives. The letters were postmarked from Columbus, Ohio, but there was no return address. One of the receivers of these letters was Mary Gillespie, a bus driver. She was accused in one of these letters of having an affair with the school superintendent, and the letters just kept coming in from this unknown sender. Then, Mary's husband, Ron, also became a target. He received a chilling ultimatum to end his wife's supposed affair or face dire consequences: death. Ron was found dead in his pickup truck after a mysterious phone call which had seemingly confirmed his suspicion about the letter writer's identity. He'd left in his pickup truck with a firearm but was found dead soon after, having crashed into a tree. Now, authorities ruled Ron's death an accident, but then the letters continued. A number of residents received letters saying that Sheriff Dwight Radcliffe, who had investigated Ron's death, had been involved in a cover-up. At one point, this mysterious writer even planted threatening signs along Mary Gillespie's bus route, one of which she went to take down, only to find out it'd been booby-trapped. If Mary had pulled the sign down in a particular way, a small pistol would have fired at her. Now, one man was arrested, Paul Freshore, but it's never been 100% verified that he was behind these letters. Eventually, he got out on parole. Case is still a mystery to this day. In the Hills and Dales Metro Park in Kittering, Ohio, there's a structure with a very shadowy past, the Haunted Witch's Tower, also known as Frankenstein's Castle. It was completed in 1941, and this 30-foot tall tower was constructed by boys with the National Youth Administration using salvaged stone. Its purpose was to provide panoramic views of the community country club, with its lookout platform offering vistas stretching up to 15 miles. But because of how remote the tower is, a lot of young hooligans started flocking there in the 60s. Graffiti covered its walls, and bottles of liquor and beer cans littered the grounds. Even shingles torn from the roof and glass bottles became ammo for attacks on passing cars below on Peterson Boulevard. Then in 1967, during a thunderstorm, a young woman named Peggy Harmison sought shelter inside the tower with her boyfriend, Ronnie Stevens. Bad move. Lightning struck the tower, killing Peggy instantly. Her body was found on the 11th step, half covered in severe burns. Ronnie survived, but he was found in a state of uncontrollable shock, apparently running around screaming. And ever since that night, there have been stories about the ghost of Peggy haunting the tower. Alright, let's switch things up with a haunted golf club. You don't hear about haunted golf clubs very often. Legend has it that in the 60s, a bride fell from a balcony at Oakhurst Golf Club in Grove City, Ohio, and her ghost is said to haunt the establishment to this very day. One of the most frequently reported sightings involves the ghostly figure of a woman dressed in white, believed to be the ghost of the bride. The upstairs kitchen, located near the ballroom where events are held, is said to be a hotspot for paranormal activity. Employees have reported hearing unexplained sounds of pots and pans clanging and knocking late at night, only to discover that items have been mysteriously rearranged by morning. Alright, we're finishing things off today with Minerva. It all began in August of 1978 when the Caton family reported encountering a strange creature near their home. According to the Catons, they were enjoying a quiet evening when they heard unusual noises coming from outside. They came face to face with this towering ape-like creature standing over 7 feet tall. The creature reportedly had shaggy dark fur covering its body, it had glowing red eyes, and emitted this foul odor. The Catons quickly ran back to the safety of their home and phoned the cops. In the days that followed, all these other sightings of a mysterious creature were reported by other residents of Minerva. Witnesses described similar encounters with a large, hairy beast lurking in the shadows, but none of the stories were scarier than the Catons, who said the creature returned to their property several times, hurling rocks at their home, staring at them through their kitchen window, and even killing their dog. It's one of the most violent Bigfoot cases ever reported. We're starting things off with Miamisburg in Montgomery County, which has some pretty spooky spots, including an Arby's. All kinds of disturbing stuff is said to go on at this fast food joint. Employees closing up for the night alone have said they've heard laughter coming from the basement, only to find no one there. Some will also report having their hair pulled by some unseen force. There's also a ghostly man who sometimes is seen staring into the oven during opening or closing hours. Hillgrove Cemetery is probably the most well-renowned haunted hotspot in this town, though some visitors will say they see a young girl crying over a grave, but when approached, she'll just stare at you for a moment before vanishing into thin air. There's also the grave of a preacher's daughter who took her own life after being disowned by her family. A Bible was said to have sat on her grave, with stories of it appearing broken one instant, but then perfectly fine the next. Next up is East Liverpool, which is home to a couple haunted parks, a haunted cemetery, and of course, a haunted phone booth. As silly as a haunted phone booth might sound though, the story is actually pretty spooky. So apparently a young man was killed in the area and his ghost haunts the street that he died on. Some will say that on some nights, especially Saturdays during the month of March, passersby will hear ringing coming from the booth. And if you answer the phone, you might just hear a somber, ghostly voice on the other end telling you to look across the street. And if you do, you just might see a headless young man waving before vanishing into the shadows. Now we move on to Sandusky, Ohio, which has a few notoriously haunted spots. One is the Sandusky County Historic Jail and Dungeon. This place, which was built in the 1840s, is no longer a jail or a dungeon, or I guess it technically is a dungeon and a jail, but it's just not operating as one. There are tours of the place though, and the staff and many people who visit claim to have experienced some pretty eerie stuff. Something that's said to happen every so often has to do with the courthouse security system. So sometimes at around 2 or 3 in the morning, the motion alarm just goes off, detecting someone or something outside the dungeon door. Whatever it is will then make its way up the steps to the first floor of the courthouse. Now I say whatever it is because when security cameras get checked, there's usually no one in the footage. But on rare nights, there is a shadowy figure with a brimmed hat seen spotted sitting on a bench outside the courthouse. The fire alarm has also been known to be pulled even when nobody's near it. Whatever spirits are haunting this place, they seem to really enjoy loud, obnoxious noises. And on top of all that, you also have your typical disembodied sounds like voices and footsteps when there's nobody else around. We're gonna stay in Sandusky for a bit though, and talk about Cedar Point. Cedar Point is one of the most popular amusement parks in the US, but it also has a bit of a dark side. When we think of haunted theme parks, it's usually the abandoned ones where we picture all the paranormal stuff going on, but Cedar Point is still very much open. It was built in 1870 though, so it's been around for a while, and any theme park that old has definitely had its fair share of horrific accidents. Get it? Fair share theme park? Alright, one of the most haunted attractions was the Frontier Town Carousel, which is no longer there, but people would often claim to catch a glimpse of a ghostly woman riding one of the horses. She's said to be the wife of the man who carved the horses on the carousel. He'd killed her after finding out that she was cheating on him with a jockey, so now her spirit is attached to the carousel, coming out at midnight to ride a fake horse every full moon, which she's probably not too plussed about. For a woman who really seemed to like being around horses, a wooden one probably just doesn't cut it. Not to mention that she's stuck on a pretty boring ride that was built by the dude who shot her to death. So there's also that. Next on the list we have the town of Worcester. You thought the haunted Arby's was intriguing? Try the haunted Pizza Hut in this town. Yeah, you can't even grab a slice of pizza in Ohio without something paranormal or weird happening. I'd love to do a road trip through Ohio visiting every haunted fast food restaurant, actually. Could call it like Fast Frights Ohio tour or something. So this Pizza Hut is part of a big plaza that was all built over the grounds of a former insane asylum. So there could be some lingering spirits in the area, most of whom seem to really stick to the Pizza Hut. There's also a Taco Bell in the plaza, which some paranormal stuff is said to go on, but there's not as many stories about that place because there's probably like 5 people who goes to Taco Bell, especially when you have a Pizza Hut right there. I'm gonna get tons of comments now from like Taco Bell fans being like, Taco Bell's the best. I don't know. I just think it's kind of mediocre. Staff at the Pizza Hut, though, have seen figures vanish into the walls. One manager who was closing up for the night was startled to hear footsteps following her and then turned around to see nothing but a white mist hovering in the air. Marietta in Washington County. This town is probably most well known for Anchorage Mansion, which is said to be very haunted. It was built by Douglas Putnam for his wife Eliza in the 1800s, but it's said Eliza died shortly after moving in, and people claim to have seen her ghost wandering around or peeking out of windows. Later on, the mansion was turned into a nursing home, where residents also reported seeing Eliza's ghost. Some say there are secret tunnels under the mansion as well, maybe from the Underground Railroad, but nobody really knows if they're haunted as well, but it's Ohio, so I'm presuming they are. Marietta is also home to a haunted Comfort Inn, where the televisions are known to turn off and on by themselves, doors open and close on their own, and guests will occasionally wake up with the feeling of cold hands on their body, luckily to find that no one is there in the room with them. I'd rather have a ghost in my room than a chilly intruder. Again, in Washington County, we have the village of Fredericksburg, which is home to Robin Industries, which does custom molding for rubber and plastic components. It was formerly the Fredericksburg pottery site, which had a pretty dark past, and the building is rumored to be haunted by multiple spirits. There were 2 major tragic events at Fredericksburg pottery site, including 2 devastating fires and a fatal train accident that took the lives of 12 people. So employees at the site have reported some pretty eerie encounters, like feeling sudden cold spots. Now, I usually kind of roll my eyes when people say cold spots. It's like, all right, spot's cold, whatever. But these are extra strange because staff will report feeling them behind machinery that runs at extremely high temperatures. One story involves the ghost of a man blamed for the train derailment, who is said to show up in the mold room. In the shipping room, sightings of an older gentleman believed to be the former mayor who witnessed the tragic train accident have also been reported. Then there's the apparition of an elderly woman who's been seen swinging doors open and shutting off machinery. The stairwell leading to the office is said to be guarded also by a spirit, with one employee experiencing a strong stench and then a sudden gust of wind that nearly knocked her down the stairs. And unless someone was eating some bad burritos from Taco Bell that day, I think it might have been a ghost. So I know we've covered Dayton, Ohio already, but I didn't mention the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which is said to be one of the most haunted spots in the state. It's even been featured on Ghost Hunters. One eerie story involves the ghost of a young Vietnamese boy believed to have perished in one of the museum's helicopters. Visitors have reported sightings of the boy wandering the museum grounds after dark. And of course, then they go up to talk to him, and he's not actually there. It's not just some kid who ran into the place. There's also a German World War II fighter plane said to be inhabited by the ghost of its pilot. Visitors claim to have seen the pilot waving from the plane's window. Seeing as it's the ghost of a German World War II fighter pilot, though, I'm not sure if what he's doing is actually a wave. The helicopter named Hopalong is said to be haunted by a pilot who met a tragic end, with staff reporting sightings of him desperately flipping switches in a futile attempt to escape. The Black Maria, known for its secret missions during the Vietnam War, is also said to be haunted by the spirits of soldiers who died on board. The boxcar plane, famous for dropping the atomic bomb on Nagasaki, is also rumored to be haunted by a young boy who is said to dart past it during the night. Haunted inns, always a staple of small villages, and Granville in Licking County, Ohio, has one of its very own, the Buckton Inn. This place dates back all the way to 1812, so plenty of history with this place. Even Abraham Lincoln stayed here, and some of those who were escaping from the Underground Railroad stayed here at one time as well. So with all the people who have passed through the doors and slept under this roof, all the history surrounding the building, it probably comes as no shock that some energy is said to linger within the inn. Not only do you have the spirits of past guests who have long since passed, but even former deceased employees are said to have never fully left. Like one of the previous owners, Ethel Bonnie Houston, for example, who's become known as the Lady in Blue. Several guests have claimed to see a woman in a blue dress roaming the hallways, only to walk right through closed doors or just vanish into thin air altogether. Some have also smelt cigar smoke out of nowhere before spotting a man who also vanishes into thin air. This is said to be the ghost of the inn's founder, Major Buxton. And we're to finish things off with Loudonville in Ashland County. This place is known for its two supposedly haunted spots, one of which is a hotel, the other a park. First, there's Mohican State Park, which is said to be haunted for a couple different reasons. Mainly though, there used to be an asylum on the land in the 1800s, which might help explain some of the ghostly stuff going on. Witnesses have also reported seeing a mysterious light in the park for over 2 decades. Then there's Landell's Mohican Castle, which is actually a hotel and a damn cool looking one too. Looks like something you'd see in Norway. It was built on the grounds of a former English/German church. The story goes that in the late 1800s, a dispute over language during worship services led to the church mysteriously burning down after the Germans decided to relocate their relatives' graves. Since the current owners acquired the property in 1991, a series of unexplained fires have just been plaguing the place, including the destruction of a book factory in 92 and an on-site restaurant in 2007. Some believe the land is just cursed, with guests reporting sightings of a girl in blue in the graveyard and hearing crying in the cemetery and pool building. People will also claim to see Civil War era soldiers in their rooms. Elmendorf, Texas was the home of Joe Ball, who committed a series of gruesome crimes in the 30s. So this is an absolutely insane case here. I'm sure viewers from Texas are very familiar with Joe Ball, but I'd never heard of this story, and I'm pretty surprised that it's not more well known. So Joe Ball was a serial killer. He has a couple interesting nicknames: the Butcher of Elmendorf and the Alligator Man, both of which fit. He fought in World War I, and when he returned to Texas, he started making money as a bootlegger. Then, when Prohibition ended, he opened a saloon. At the back, he built a pond where he kept 6 alligators. He'd often feed live cats and dogs to the gators, but that didn't satisfy him for long. Soon, women in the area started going missing, including his own wife. Now, in 1938, 2 county sheriffs arrived at his property to question him about several of these missing women, and Ball pulled out a pistol and took his own life. But a handyman of Joe's, Clifford Wheeler, told authorities about how he'd assisted Ball in disposing of the bodies of 2 women who he'd killed, feeding them to his alligators. It's believed Joe Ball may have taken the lives of at least 20 women.
Next up, we have a small town in Texas that was once home to a lesser known but incredibly gruesome serial killer, Henry Lee Lucas, who claims to have killed over 3,000 individuals during his criminal career, which spanned from the 1960s all the way into the 1980s. Also known as the Confession Killer or Highway Stalker, Lee Lucas was born in Blacksford, Virginia, and at a young age lost his father to hypothermia, and so his mother was forced to raise him on her own. Clearly, Henry wasn't happy with this, as his mother was the first person he killed in 1960 in Michigan. He was sent to prison but only served 10 years due to overcrowding. And that's when he moved to Ringgold, Texas with his niece Frida Powell to work for a sick woman named Katie Rich, both of whom he would later kill. While he claimed to have ended the lives of thousands of individuals through restricting airways, impaling them with sharp objects, blunt force, and hit and runs, he was convicted of only 11 killings.
Texarkana is home to one of the creepiest cases in the state's history, the Texarkana Moonlight Killer case. So this case was heavy inspiration for slasher movies that would come years later, along with tons of urban legends. The killer literally wore a sack with holes cut out for his eyes and would attack innocent couples while their cars were parked in an area called Lover's Lane. It's about as classic as it gets. So the first attack happened on February 22nd, 1946. A young couple, Jimmy Hollisand and his girlfriend Mary Jean Larry, were attacked by a man with a pillowcase over his head carrying a firearm. Jimmy was pistol whipped and very injured, and Mary was attacked, but the two lived. Many of the other victims wouldn't be so lucky though. He would attack 6 other people, and it all happened in a period of 10 weeks. The assailant became known as the Phantom of Texarkana, and the case was never solved.
Regular hospitals are bad enough, but abandoned and haunted hospitals definitely take the cake, so of course we had to include at least one on today's list. The Yorktown Memorial Hospital, located in Yorktown, Texas, between San Antonio and the Gulf Coast. It was built in 1951 to house and treat those suffering from substance abuse. When the hospital was abandoned in 1980, the living residents and staff members exited the building. But what about those who died during their time in the hospital? Well, it's said that they still inhabit the premises to this day. And no, I'm not talking about 1 or 2 patients who died while under the hospital's care. I'm talking about thousands, over 2,000 to be exact. So really, it's no wonder the place is extremely haunted. Honestly, I'm surprised it didn't open up some kind of gateway to hell and land a spot on the list in our last video. Check it out if you'd like. Those who have entered the building have reported feeling a strange rotting sensation and claim that they can feel the tormented soul's energies in the walls. Not only that, but many people have said they've heard screams and disembodied voices while inside, as well as seeing strange floating lights in the hallways, despite the fact that the building is ancient and has no electricity. If you've been, let me know your experience.
Now we move on to Kerrville, Texas, with the case of Janine Jones, a nurse who also terrorized San Antonio. What an absolute creep this woman is. Yes, she is still alive. She took the lives of an estimated 60 young patients in her care between 1970 and 1982. She'd inject patients with a variety of substances that would cause cardiac arrest. She first started working as a licensed vocational nurse at Bexar County Hospital in San Antonio in the pediatric intensive care unit. But hospital staff started realizing that an abnormal amount of young patients were dying in Jones's care. Now, here's where things get really infuriating. An investigation could have been carried out right there and then, and things could have ended here. But the hospital didn't want any negative attention, and they certainly did not want to be sued. So instead of alerting authorities, they asked all of their current LVNs to resign and then rehired exclusively registered nurses to take control of the pediatric ICU. This meant that Jones could just move on and start working at another hospital, which she did. So more young patients died at her hands at a pediatrician's clinic in Kerrville. There, a doctor finally found she'd been accessing lethal amounts of succinylmethonium chloride. So in 1985, she was finally convicted and is now serving life in prison.
Circling right on back to Yorktown, it appears as though this particular town is home to not only an incredibly haunted hospital, but also an incredibly disturbing creature known as a Wendigo. Although the creature is best described in Algonquin folklore, which is Canadian for my Americans on this channel, many locals of the town claim to have seen one of the beasts. Many people have compared the Wendigo to a skinwalker, as it is tall and lanky and somewhat humanoid, but can shapeshift and has been known to devour human flesh. And when a Wendigo finds the body of a deceased hiker, it will often inhabit it, and then turn to killing those who attempt to come into contact with its human exterior. Many people also claim to have seen the demon take the form of animals and follow and stalk them throughout the area. Stay safe out there in Wendigo.
Speaking of creepy creatures, Texas is also home to an entity known as Goatman, who stalks the old Alton Bridge connecting Denton and Copper Canyon. So the tale traces back to a black goat farmer named Oscar Washburn, who'd moved his family near the bridge. And Washburn earned a reputation as a very reliable businessman and was nicknamed the Goatman by locals. He even hung a sign on Alton Bridge pointing towards his home, proudly declaring, "This way to the Goatman." But in 1938, members of the local government who had ties to the Ku Klux Klan kidnapped Washburn from his family. They took him to the bridge, hung a noose around his neck, and threw him over the side. When they looked down expecting to see him dead though, they found the noose completely empty. Now, locals warn that crossing the bridge at night without headlights, just as the Klansmen did, will summon the Goatman. People crossing the bridge will claim to spot ghostly figures, mysterious lights coming from the woods, and even physical encounters like being touched, grabbed, or having rocks thrown at them. from some unseen force, or of course a half-man, half-goat monster.
Next up, surprise, surprise, it's another creepy hospital. Worley Hospital in Pampa, Texas. The institution was opened in 1928 but closed its doors in the 1970s due to lack of revenue. After 40 years of sitting abandoned, the building has become quite a talking point for the town's locals, who claim that it is haunted by patients who died within its walls during its 42 years of operation. After many townspeople reported seeing a black silhouette in the window of the abandoned building, ghost hunters began to take interest. Those who have entered have been greeted with decrepit and decaying walls, ceilings, and floors that have been heavily vandalized, but it appears as though trespassers aren't the only ones to make their way through the empty halls of the once surgically specialized facility. Many of the patients who died within the building's walls, as well as a 25-year-old nurse who was poisoned while working at the hospital, are said to roam the grounds. People have reported seeing demonic creatures stalking them while exploring the floors of the hospitals, with the majority of the activity taking place on the 3rd floor, where surgeries would have been performed when the hospital was running. Oh, and the current owner of the grounds wants to renovate the building into a ministry. Coincidence? I do not think so.
League City, Texas is home to an area known as the Killing Fields. So there is an abnormally large list of people who have been found dead in this stretch of land surrounding Interstate Highway 45. And there are also a number of people who've gone missing from this area and have still yet to be found. And out of more than 30 cases, only a small handful have ever been solved. The place is such a hotspot for mysterious deaths that a task force, Operation Halt, was set up just to investigate these incidents alone. The first cases started cropping up in the 70s with the discovery of multiple bodies scattered throughout the area, and over the decades, law enforcement agencies have recovered the remains of numerous people, many of them young women. And it's not even clear if there's just one assailant responsible, a group, or if the area is just an ideal spot to kind of get rid of evidence. We really don't know. It's a complete mystery to this day.
And finally, we have a man with a thing for eyes. Stealing them, that is. It all started in the 1990s in a rural area of Dallas. Is it a town? Not really, but this case is pure evil, so listen up. During the 90s, SEX workers began turning up dead at an alarming rate, with one very striking thing in common. You guessed it, their eyes had been completely removed from their sockets. The killer was Charles Albright, also known as the Eyeball Killer. When he was young, Charles had quite the knack for taxidermy. He would stuff many animals a week, doing his best to make them look pristine, but there was one thing missing: eyes. His mother refused to buy glass eyes for the animals, and so instead Charles would use buttons. When he got a little older, he slept with an SEX worker, which led to him getting a transmitted infection. I feel like the pieces are starting to come together. His obsession with the eyes and his hatred for women of this certain profession grew exponentially over the years, and on December 13th of 1990 he took his first life. After violating the woman, he fired a projectile from a handheld weapon, execution style, into the back of her head and carefully removed the eyes of the victim with what has been described as surgical precision. Charles was convicted of 1 killing, but most likely committed at least 3. He was sentenced to death and was executed in August of 2022. Shepherdstown, West Virginia, is arguably one of the most haunted places in America, according to those who have visited the town and experienced its dark paranormal atmosphere. The town was actually formed long before America became a country. Well, 46 years at least, and it was originally named Mecklenburg, but that changed when Thomas Shepard obtained the land in 1734. It's considered a historic Civil War area, as just 3 miles up from the town, the Antietam Battle, the most gruesome battle of the Civil War, was fought. A hotel in the town is also home to some pretty dark deaths. In one instance, a man took his own life after losing a card game. In another, a young man was killed for winning. Both men are said to roam around the hotel, and many claim to hear the younger of the two crying out for his mother, as he did during his last living moments. But perhaps the most famous sighting in the town is that of a dark, shadowy figure that lurks in the clock tower after dark. Oh, and the bakery is also haunted, with almost anyone who enters it claiming to have felt the sensation of hands pushing up against them and hearing whispered conversations in the waiting area despite being completely alone.
Next on the list we have Dingus in Mingo County. Love that name, Dingus. This is a very small and remote community. There are under 2,000 residents, and one of the things that makes this place really interesting is that one of the only ways to access the town is through a mile-long, very narrow, one-lane tunnel, which can be aggravating at the best of times, I imagine, and very dangerous at the worst. But Dingus also has a pretty dark history. It was a railroad and mining town at one time, and it was one of the most lawless places in the state. Lawmen struggled to keep order, and shootouts between police and outlaws was pretty common. And one thing the residents did not take kindly to were outsiders, and a lot of this was racially motivated. It wasn't uncommon for immigrants to be met with armed townspeople at the other end of the tunnel who would use very aggressive methods to keep them away. A lot of dark things happened at Dingus Tunnel, not just from violence like this, but accidents as well, like train collisions. So, aside from all the dark history, it probably comes as no surprise that many locals claim the tunnel to be quite haunted.
Next up, we have the Weston Asylum. You know we had to have at least one asylum on our list. It's classic. Back in the mid-1800s, the town of Weston was home to the controversially named Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. It was used to house and treat the mentally ill of the time. However, that pretty much meant anyone whose opinion opposed those in positions of authority, or women who sometimes cried. But I digress. While the exact number of deaths that occurred on the grounds remains unknown, local historian and state hospital expert Titus Swan has estimated the number to be in or above a 5-figure range, meaning that at least 10,000 people died in the hospital. So, like, no wonder this place is super haunted. I mean, I think we know what kind of torment went on in those places back in the day. Not only that, but this particular asylum was often overcrowded, meaning that even without what would today be considered gross misconduct, the living conditions were already pretty bleak. Today, those who enter the once abandoned building that has since been reopened to the public as a historic landmark have reported feeling a sense of extreme dread, seeing mysterious, shadowy figures roaming the halls, and hearing the disembodied, helpless screams of patients past.
Next up, we have Sheep Squatch of Boone County. I'm kind of cheating here with this one, adding a whole county to the list. But the creature has been spotted all throughout the place, so I kind of had to. The Sheep Squatch, also sometimes referred to as the White Thing, is described as a large, woolly, furred monster with goat horns and razor-sharp teeth. Sightings of the creature started being reported in Boone throughout the 90s, beginning in '94, when 2 youngsters spotted the strange creature while playing in their yard. Now, what I find interesting about these reports is that the creature is always described as having white fur. Now, why do I find this interesting? Well, with Bigfoot sightings, there's usually a chance people could be misidentifying a bear, whereas here, like, what animal is there the size of a bear with white fur? Polar bears, but they're not really roaming around West Virginia. The creature was spotted again in 1995 by a couple driving down a road in Boone County. They spotted a large white-furred animal sitting in a ditch. They didn't know what it was, so they stopped to look. Then it raced towards them. They sped out of there, but found large scratch marks on their car once they made it back home.
If you're gonna do an asylum, you might as well do a prison, specifically the West Virginia Penitentiary, located in the small town of Moundsville. The prison opened its doors in 1863 after West Virginia split from just Virginia, becoming its own state. During its 119-year operation, some pretty dark stuff went on inside of its walls, which earned the prison a spot on the United States Department of Justice's top 10 most violent correctional facilities list. The recreational area of the prison, located in the basement, often saw various forms of illegal activity, including assault, violation of assault, substance abuse, and even killings. At any given time during the penitentiary's operation, between 600 and 700 inmates were held on the grounds, but even still the prison was highly overcrowded, with inmates often having to sleep on the floor. And over the years, the property saw almost 1,000 deaths. Many people believe that those who died within the prison never actually left. In fact, many visitors to the grounds have seen and even photographed the shadowy figure of a man that roams the halls. And the staff working on the premises of what is now a historical site have reported being accosted while on the job. Oh, and remember the basement? Many people have claimed to have heard screams coming from its depths, but most are far too scared to go down and check it out.
In the town of Princeton sits the Lake Shawnee Amusement Park. Unless you live in Princeton, West Virginia, or are a paranormal enthusiast though, you've probably never heard of the place. It's not much of a tourist destination anymore because it's been abandoned since 1988. It's said that the park was built on cursed land, and that's not just because people have seen specters lingering around the park, it's because there were tragic deaths at the park, and the place was built on land with some pretty dark history. There was a massacre on this land back in 1785. The landowner, Mitchell Clay, had lost 2 of his sons to a Native American raiding party and sought revenge. He gathered up a bunch of locals and attacked them right back. Then, in 1926, a man named Conley Trigg Snidow Sr. decided the land would be a perfect spot for a theme park. Over the years, there were 2 drownings in the pool. The park was also closed for a time after a failed health inspection. Then a former employee of the park bought the land in 1988, but was forced to close it down again just a year later because of increased insurance rates. So not the best luck for this place, and now the old structures like the Ferris wheel and swing ride stand eerily unused, coated in rust and haunted by ghosts. So they say.
This next one is pretty sad, but also pretty remarkable. In 1897 in Greenbrier County, and I can do a county because James did a county, so if we go down together. Anyways, in 1897 in Greenbrier County, Zona Shu was found dead. A funeral was held and Zona was laid to rest, but she couldn't rest, and so Zona's spirit visited her mother and explained to her that she had not died in the way everyone assumed she had, but instead she had been killed by her husband, who had been routinely aggressive throughout their entire marriage. Upon learning this information, Zona's mother demanded that her daughter's body be dug up and re-examined. And sure enough, upon closer inspection, it became clear to the prosecutor that Zona's neck had been broken. Her husband was arrested for the crime, and the city even installed a plaque recognizing Zona's ghost's involvement in the conviction of her killer.
The town of Harper's Ferry is said to be teeming with paranormal activity. In fact, it's said to be the most haunted town in the state. Harper's Ferry played a big role in the Civil War, and a lot of both Union and Confederate soldiers died here. In September of 1862, an estimated 13,000 soldiers died at the Battle of Harper's Ferry. There were also a number of raids, one of which was led by John Brown, who's said to haunt the town to this day. Some also say that on some nights you can hear the ghostly sounds of drummers marching their way down High Street. And there's also the tale of Screaming Jenny. So Jenny had no family, no home. She lived in an abandoned storage shed by the Harper's Ferry Railroad. One fall night, Jenny sat huddled by a fire, and then a spark leapt up from the fire, landing on her clothes, which began to catch fire. She was too cold and weak to notice before it was too late. She started screaming and rushed down the train tracks for help. Now here's the thing, when you're on fire, your vision is kind of blocked by light already, so she did not see the 2 glowing lights of a train rushing right towards her, and she was flattened by the train. Ever since this incident, on particularly cold autumn nights, some say they can hear the sounds of screams coming from the train tracks. Conductors have even seen a glowing figure flailing in the night, only to vanish into thin air once the train gets up too close.
Next up, we have the Parkersburg North Bend Rail Trail. I'm not sure if that's a tongue twister or the title of an adult movie. But anyways, in the daytime the trail is quite lovely and pretty serene, a great place to go for picnics and lunch dates. However, I suppose if your lunch date is at a park, it's already a picnic. Anyways, you could also go for breakfast, but I wouldn't recommend you go at night. Why? Because it's haunted. Well, part of it is at least. Specifically, the 1,300 foot long tunnel that can be found along the trail, aka tunnel number 19. It is said that a woman wearing a white dress walks mournfully around inside of its dark walls. The legend goes that she was a bride riding on a train with her groom when she was pushed off and died beside the tracks. People in the area have also reported having found human bones in abandoned houses nearby, but that's an entirely different mystery for another day.
And finally, we have the town of Grafton, which is famous for one of the strangest cryptids in the United States, the Grafton Monster, which was first spotted in 1964 by a reporter named Robert Cockrell. He described the creature as this large 7 to 9 foot tall beast with white skin and no visible head. He was driving home from work late at night when he spotted the creature in the middle of the road. They raced home, then gathered 2 of his friends to come back to the site to investigate. The creature was gone, but they claimed to have come across large footprints, and they also heard a strange, low, bellowing whistle sound in the distance. The next day, dozens of calls started coming into the local newspaper, with people reporting to have spotted a similar looking creature, and that's when Cockrell decided to write his article. Reports that the cryptid started dying out by the end of that summer in 1964, but there's still sporadic sightings here and there.
Starting off this list today, we have Armero, Colombia. The story behind this town is a 20th century tragedy that serves as a reminder of the dangers of volcanoes. It's 1985 and Colombia's Nevado del Ruiz, a seemingly peaceful snow-capped volcano, decides that it's showtime. But this isn't your average volcanic eruption with just lava and ash. Oh no, this volcano went all out. The heat from the eruption melted the mountain's glaciers, creating a monstrous lahar, a deadly cocktail of water, mud, rocks, and other debris. Basically, nature's own concrete flood. This wasn't a slow-moving disaster movie scene where you can just run to higher ground. This lahar traveled with the speed and force of a freight train. Now, imagine the town of Armero situated in a valley below this ticking time bomb. Most people were caught off guard as the magnitude of the threat wasn't fully understood or communicated. So when the lahar hit, it was like a scene from a nightmare, obliterating everything in its path and leaving little time for escape. Homes, buildings, and lives were swept away in just moments. Over 25,000 people lost their lives in what would be remembered as one of the deadliest volcanic disasters in the 20th century. This tragic event was a wake-up call on the importance of volcanic monitoring and emergency preparedness, and it just went to show the true power of nature and how crucial it is to respect and understand the warning signs that it gives us. Alright, next up on our list today we have Dhanushkodi. Nestled in the southernmost tip of India, this town was not just any town, it was a bustling port, a bridge between India and Sri Lanka, brimming with life and commerce until disaster struck. Picture the vibrant markets, the sounds of daily life, and the trains chugging away. It was a hub of activity and connection. Then came that fateful day in 1964 when nature unleashed its fury. A ferocious cyclone with winds that roared like the engines of 1,000 trains struck with merciless force. The waves, as tall as mountains, crashed onto the shores, obliterating nearly everything in its path. More than 1,700 lives were lost, families were torn apart, and the town was left in ruins, submerged under the relentless waves. Today, what remains of the town is a spectral landscape. The ruins of the railway station and the church stand eerily, monuments to the town's tragic past. Visitors to this ghost town can't help but feel a chill as they wander through the remnants. Next up on our list today we have Yungay in Peru. Once a buzzing ski resort town cradled in the arms of the breathtaking Peruvian Andes, this town had no idea what was in store for it. It was the kind of place that postcards are made of, with tourists flocking to enjoy its winter sports and local charm. But in 1970, Mother Nature had a catastrophic twist in store. A mammoth earthquake struck, its epicenter alarmingly close to the town. The quake was so powerful that it dislodged a massive section of ice and rock from Mount Huascaran, Peru's highest peak, which loomed ominously nearby. Now imagine a colossal wave of ice, rock, and debris hurtling down the mountain at speeds that defy belief, completely ruining everything in its path. This wasn't a scene from a disaster movie, it was a grim reality for Yungay. In just a few harrowing minutes, the town was buried under a thick blanket of destruction, claiming the lives of over 20,000 people in one of the deadliest avalanches in history. Today, the original site of Yungay stands as a ghostly memorial to that fateful day, largely untouched except for by time and the elements settlements. Visitors to the area can still see the remnants poking through the earth. A new young guy has risen a few kilometers away, striving to move forward while honoring the memory of the past. Next up on our list today, we have Dollersheim in Austria. Nestled in the picturesque landscapes of Austria, Dollersheim is a village steeped in history, with its origins tracing back to the year 1143. Imagine walking through a place where every stone and corner has a story dating back almost 9 centuries. But Dollersheim's serene beauty hides a tumultuous past. During the grip of the bad guys regime during World War II, the village's tranquility was shattered as residents were compelled to leave their homes, their familiar life turned upside down to make way for a military training ground. After World War II, the village didn't resume its former bustle and charm. It remained uninhabited, a ghost of its past self. Yet the echoes of history linger. Today, visitors to Dollersheim can explore the remnants of what once was. A church that stood witness to centuries of change, a town square that once buzzed with daily life, and a graveyard where the village's ancestors rest, perhaps still holding on to their stories. Next up on our list today, we have Kataktchan in Russia. Found in the heart of Russia's vast and frost-bitten Far Eastern region, Kataktchan tells a story deeply etched in the annals of wartime and post-Soviet history. Initially established during the throes of World War II, the town was birthed through the toil and sweat of prisoners who were put to work in its coal mines. These mines not only fueled the war effort, but also sustained a burgeoning community against the backdrop of harsh and unforgiving landscapes. For decades, Kataktchan thrived on coal extraction, its residents carving out a life amid the extremes. However, the dissolution of the Soviet Union marked the beginning of the end for this isolated settlement. Economic turmoil ensued, leading to the closure of one of its lifeblood coal mines in the early 1990s. The town's fate was sealed in 1996 when a tragic explosion wreaked havoc, causing irreparable damage and leading to a mass exodus. By 2010, Kataktchan had become a ghost town, its abandoned buildings and desolate streets standing as eerie testaments to its very turbulent past. Once home to over 10,000 souls, its population plummeted to 0, leaving behind only memories and the chilling silence of abandonment. Today, Kataktchan exists in a peculiar limbo, captivating the curious and the adventurous who venture to explore its ruins, a contrast to the vibrant life it once nurtured. Next up on our list today, we are heading over to Villa Epicuén in Argentina. Imagine strolling through a place that feels like a scene straight out of a post-apocalyptic movie. Well, welcome to Villa Epicuén in Argentina. This isn't just your average ghost town, it's got a backstory that could rival any thriller. A thriving lakeside resort town buzzing with tourists, laughter, and life, families soaking up the sun, kids splashing in the water, Villa Epicuén was the place to be, especially known for its therapeutic salty waters, much like the Dead Sea. But here's the twist, nature of course had its own plans. Over the decades, the lake began to swell, slowly nibbling away at the town's edges until, in the 1980s, it devoured the whole place, submerging everything under meters of water. The town disappeared, leaving only memories and submerged dreams. Fast forward a few decades and the scene shifts again. The waters recede, almost as mysteriously as they came, revealing the skeleton of Villa Epicuén. Today, it's an astonishing sight. Buildings, trees, and streets all laid bare, encrusted with salt and frozen in time. It's a little bit spooky, incredibly intriguing, and undeniably a one-of-a-kind destination that tells the tale of the relentless passage of time. Next up today, we have Plymouth in Montserrat, a place that once thrummed with life, its streets bustling with the daily hustle and bustle you'd expect from a capital city, and now it stands in stark contrast. A ghost town that is eerily silent, its buildings and streets swallowed by nature's fury. Back in the summer of 1995, the earth rumbled, and Montserrat's Soufriere Hills volcano awoke from its slumber, dramatically altering the town's fate. Ash clouds billowed into the sky and molten lava crept through the streets, prompting a mass exodus. By December, the once vibrant town was left deserted, its 4,000 residents seeking safety elsewhere. Though a few brave souls ventured back, hoping to reclaim their lives, the volcano had other plans. In 1997, another fierce eruption forced even these resilient returnees to abandon their homes for good. Today, Plymouth is an uncanny testament to the power of nature, its buildings peeking out from the ashen landscape, a town frozen in time, with a population count that's dropped to an eerie 0. So while you can't really visit Plymouth for a casual stroll or a quick bite, its story continues to fascinate and to resonate. Next up, we are heading over to Tawergha in Libya. Oh, Tawergha. A place with a tale as haunting as a ghost story, but sadly, it's all too real. Imagine a town in Libya home to about 40,000 souls living their daily lives only for everything to change when the winds of the 2011 Libyan civil war blew through. This town wasn't just touched by conflict, it was transformed by it, earning the eerie title of Ghost Town. Schools, shops, homes, all abandoned, the laughter and chatter of life replaced by silence. Fast forward to 7 years post-conflict, and the image of Tawergha doesn't get much brighter. The residents were forced to flee, leaving behind their homes and their lives. They didn't go far, settling in a nearby town, but in a very different setup. Instead of houses, they lived in 250 tents. Despite the conflict and the loss, the spirit of the Tawergha community persisted, their resilience shining through despite the drastic change in their living conditions. Moving on down, we are heading over to Humberstone in Chile. Imagine stepping into Humberstone, a ghost town nestled in the parched Atacama Desert, which feels like wandering onto the set of an old Western film. Once this place was buzzing with around 3,500 folks, all mingling, working, and living their lives around the booming potassium nitrate, or saltpeter, industry. Saltpeter was the gold of its time, as it was a critical ingredient in gunpowder and fertilizers, fueling agriculture and warfare worldwide. From the late 1880s to 1930, this little town was like the Silicon Valley of saltpeter, shipping off heaps of this white gold to places near and far, and playing a crucial role in global economics and even in conflicts. Then, technology advanced. Synthetic alternatives to saltpeter emerged, and just like that, the demand plummeted. The town's heartbeat slowed until it stopped altogether mid-20th century, leaving behind a time capsule in the desert. Now declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site, Humberstone is now an eerie yet fascinating window into the past, showing how communities can rise and fall with the tides of industry and innovation. And finally, rounding out our list today, we have Texola, Oklahoma. Oh, Texola. It's like a postcard from another time sitting quaintly along the iconic Route 66. Now, imagine a place where the echoes of the past are so palpable that you can almost hear the hustle and bustle of its heyday. That's Texacola for you. Back in the day, 1930 to be exact, 581 souls called this town home. Fast forward to today and you'll find a drastically smaller, but nonetheless fascinating population of just 35. But why such a drastic drop? Well, Texola's story is intertwined with some major historical events. Cotton was king here until it wasn't, thanks to agricultural decline. Then came the 1-2 punch of the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression, which turned thriving communities into ghost towns across the plains. Despite these hardships, Texola has clung to life, its resilience embodied by landmarks such as the Magnolia service station and an adorably minuscule stone-walled jail.